Hi, this is Stan. Welcome back to the Lakeside Raceway build project. Let's get to routing. Well, it's pretty early in the morning. I'm kind of waiting until I know that the neighbors are up and moving a little bit. Got the table all set up, got the router. We're going to make some serious sawdust today. And so let's get going. Hope all goes well. All right, here's the router jig. We did a test route on our last episode. I've got a tiny 1/8 inch diameter router bit here, and I made a little jig that is 9 millimeters, so I can place it on here and check. That's going to be our maximum depth. I'm going to do at least 3 passes for maybe 3 millimeters each pass, and the rollers on this jig are going to track along the edge of this track because it's a very simple design. It's a flat track. There's no crossovers or any beveled edges or anything like that, any angled turns. So these little rollers are going to find their way around the outside. I just have to make sure that I hold the router tight so it doesn't put a little jig in there. And that's going to be our 5-inch dimension between the outside lane and the crash wall. Once we get that done, then we'll change the jig up. So let's get to it. Oh, I was going to say, one of the concerns I've had this router my whole adult life. I bought it from a friend that I used to work with at the radio network, Chuck Wagner, and this has been such a cool tool. But when you start cold like this and you start heating the unit up, you have to stop and go back and check and tighten everything back up again, because the heat in the metal parts can allow things to change, and what will happen is this router bit will penetrate too deeply into the work. So I always have to remember to, once the tool warms up and the bit's warm, to stop for a second, check to make sure everything is tight. And of course, another concern is that the MDF dust is so fine that it gets all over the camera lens, so I have to be really careful about that. Ta-da! Well, there's our first pass. Just a little nibble, a couple of millimeters, but we've got all the way around and defined that outer track lane. Let's see what's going on here. I'm vacuuming the slot and where the router slides on every single pass, so that it doesn't jump up and create any bumps for me. All right, let's go pass number 2. All right, second pass is done. Now this is the point where I have to stop and talk to myself and say, slow down, don't hurry, take your time, don't get complacent. A couple of passes going real well. Let's make that final depth cut, and hopefully everything will go okay. Well, I double checked to make sure everything was nice and tight on the router, and here's our 9 millimeter. So here we go. Okay, I'm going to stop for a second. I've only gone a foot or two. I'm going to check that groove since this is our final cut. And I'm checking it against my 9 millimeter gauge. I think we're good. Okay, I stopped for a second. I need to move the power cord so it doesn't bind up. I also checked our depth one more time. Never hurts because this is the final pass for this lane. You can see I have a little arrow marked. Because of the way the router spins, it's happier going one way versus another. So I'm going always, if I can, in this direction so the router doesn't fight me too much. And because this outer lane is so crucial in keying off this outer edge, I need to remember to constantly give gentle inward pressure so these rollers don't leave the edge, but downward pressure on the router as well so that it doesn't rise up. And I try to keep the sawdust from building up here again, which would lift the router and make the gauge too shallow. So let's keep going. Well, I hope you don't mind. I just don't want to leave the camera open while I'm routing. So not a lot of pictures of me routing, but I don't know, that would be like grass growing. So I think we are done with our rollers on the jig. And this is a very tricky part because you have to maintain the pressure against the edge of the table to make those rollers successful. So if you lose concentration and the thing wobbles, then you get a hook in the track, and that would be bad. The most difficult spot for me was this inside tight turn over here, but we survived it. And now I'm going to replace these rollers with pins, and now we're going to be guiding off that track, the slot that we just cut, so the router can't move left or right. It will be locked into the slot, so that will be a little less stressful. All right, we replaced the rollers with these little pins, and we are 4 1/4 inches from the center of the outside lane to the center of the next lane over. So let's get busy. All right, all 3 lanes are cut, the slots down to 9 millimeter. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get some Bondo, mix it up, and fill in a couple little screw heads here and there, and then we'll have to put our thinking cap on. All right, time for our test panel. I've got a different bit in the router. It has a small pin that rides in the grooves that we've just cut, and it has a larger bit that cuts like a 3/4 inch swath, a big channel down there to accommodate the braid on either side of the slot. I cut a few test patches here, and right here when I thought it was getting close, I took some contact cement and I glued a piece of the braid down. And what we're looking for is the braid just below the surface of the racetrack, and my goal is to shoot for about 25 thousandths below the level of the top. It's going to vary a little bit, but as long as it doesn't stick up too high or go way too deep. So I'm going to set the router bit up as close as I can to give me a total top of the braid to top of the track in the vicinity of 25 thousandths. Well, I think that turned out just great. You can see I've got the 3 lanes, outer, middle, and inner lane, and not only do we have the slots cut, but we have the little dados to receive the braid. I also cut another couple slots. This is for a retaining wall. There's a couple places on the layout where you could potentially have a head-on collision. Don't want that. Here are the bits that I use. This is just a 1/4 inch router bit, available at your home center. These two our specialty bits. This is a 1/8 inch router bit. Look at how tiny that is. I really feel sorry for this thing when I'm routing, so I try to be very gentle with that. And then this is that combination bit that has a pin that rides in the slot, and this hogs out that dado to receive the braid. This and this you can get, I got these two at Slot Car Corner. And while I can, before I bring the whole shebang into the house, I'm going to add a little black to the legs just to kind of make them disappear a little bit until such time as I get a skirt fabricated for the whole track. And here we are, woohoo! At the end of a very long and dusty day. I tried to do all of the routing in just one day out in the driveway. Got the 2 panels and the framework set up in the game room. Now we've got a lot to do. We're sort of at the beginning. We got through the super messy part, but now we've got a lot of projects and a lot of steps to do to turn this into a real racing track. So I'm not going to lie, I am beat. And there is MDF dust everywhere. On the floor in here, the living room, in my sock drawer, everywhere. So we've had some fun, and I hope you've seen a couple of easy techniques that you can use to build a slot car track for yourself. So next time, we'll be getting into some of the finer details. Hope to see you then.